The marsh swallowed the night as a cry cut through the reeds, and Evan Hale felt the sound in his ribs. His headlamp found the wild crane tangled in wire, leg bleeding dark into the floodwater. Evan Hale said, "Stay with me." The bird thrashed, beak clicking like breaking glass, and the tide crawled higher across the black mud. Maya Ortiz said, "Radio check, where are you?" And static skittered like insects. Evan Hale said, "North culvert, steel snare, bad swelling," while wind pushed cold into his gloves. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "No entry after dusk," and the rule landed like a door. Evan Hale said, "Then fire me tomorrow," because the crane trembled like a flame about to die. Lightning mapped the clouds and the reeds bent, and the wire sang thinly against bone. Evan Hale said, "Easy, old dancer," and he breathed slow so the bird might borrow the rhythm. The mud sucked at his boots, and rain began as pinpricks that promised knives. Maya Ortiz said, "Hold until I reach you," and a horn wailed somewhere distant, cruel and ordinary. The current tugged at the crane, and pain made its wings beat mud like a broken drum, so Evan braced the bird's shoulder with his forearm. Evan Hale said, "I've got you," and the promise tasted like metal. The wire sat deep, cruel as a thorn in a vein, and the tide clock ticked without mercy. Maya Ortiz said, 4 minutes out, and the radio hiss answered like rain on tin. Evan Hale said, "Bring the saline, bring the wraps," while the crane shivered into stillness that felt like surrender. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "You will be liable if it dies," and the word died was a hook. Evan Hale said, "Then I'm already hooked," and he slid the tool under the wire, patient as frost. The wind blew his hood back, and cold invaded the nape of his neck. Somewhere a night heron cried, "A witness with no badge and no pen." The crane watched him with an eye that refused to blink first, and the world narrowed to that impossible circle. The multitool slipped, and the crane jolted, so wire bit deeper, and Evan tasted panic like salt. Evan Hale said, "Easy, friend," and the word friend was a bridge over knives. A spotlight swept the distant levee, and an engine growled like a warning. Cole Maddox said, "Private access ends at dusk," and the threat rode the wind. Evan Hale said, "I'm not leaving it," and his voice found stone. Maya Ortiz said, "I see his truck. Keep your head down," while she killed her headlights. The rain came harder, smearing the world into streaks and halos. Evan Hale said, "Grant, I needed authority now," but silence came back, neat and official. The crane sagged as if the night weighed more than its bones, and guilt pressed him lower. Thunder rolled over the marsh, and the wire glimmered like a grin. Evan slid his palm to the crane's neck, finding the place where fear becomes breath, and held there. Evan Hale said, "Borrow my calm," and he matched the inhale to the exhale like a metronome in storm. Maya Ortiz said, 2 minutes, and tires hissed somewhere behind reeds. Evan Hale said, "On my count, press release," and he eased the tool under wire again. The crane did not strike, which felt like a fragile treaty signed in rain. The mud pulled at his knees, and needles of cold climbed his thighs. Evan Hale said, "One," and cut a thread of rust that rang like a note. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "I never heard that call," as if erasing sound could erase the night. Evan Hale said, "Then listen to this," and the crane's soft cry answered him. The tide lipped his boot top, and the marsh drank the moment whole. The levee engine died, and the dark felt closer, and the reeds hissed like whispers with knives. Evan Hale said, "Maya, hurry," while his fingers found the next knot. Cole Maddox said, "You cut that, you answer for damage," and the word damage bared its teeth. Evan Hale said, "It's a life," and the lightning gave him a crown for a heartbeat. The crane surged, pain lit, and his grip held, not crushing, not letting go. Maya Ortiz said, "I'm on foot," and a door thumped shut like a stamp. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "If this goes wrong, we never get permits again," and it sounded like a prayer to paper. Evan Hale said, "Then let the storm be my witness," and the tool bit wire with a bright ping. The tide climbed his shins, hungry and sure, and the night tasted of iron and rain. The final coil waited, small and vicious as a snare of doubt. Maya Ortiz splashed through the reeds, boots filling with water, flashlight beam cutting erratic arcs, and her breath fogged sharp in the wet night. She saw Evan Hale crouched, soaked, holding the crane like fragile glass. Maya Ortiz said, "Tell me it's alive," and her voice cracked as if asking for herself. Evan Hale said barely, "But the leg is ruined," and his eyes would not meet hers. The crane's wing trembled, feathers clotted with mud, and its gaze landed on Maya like judgment. She knelt, hands trembling, not from cold but from memory of another bird lost. Maya Ortiz said, "Not again. I won't lose another one," and her words burned louder than the storm. Evan Hale said, "We'll anchor it here until we can move," and pressed his palm to steady the pulse. The tide licked higher, and guilt weighed heavier than the water. The wind drove sheets of rain against their backs, and Maya unzipped the medical pack with fingers stiff as sticks. She pressed gauze to the wound, blood soaking quick as if the marsh drank it. Maya Ortiz said, "It fought harder than most people I know," and her jaw clenched to stop the quake. Evan Hale said, "That's survival, not trust," though his hand lingered longer on the crane's chest. The bird flinched, then stilled as if listening to the human rhythm beneath its body. Maya Ortiz said, "It feels like it knows," but doubt cut through the words like lightning. Evan Hale said, "Don't make it human," though his throat closed after. They both bent over the creature, their shadows long and ragged in the stormlight, as if building a fragile shelter made of only will. The storm broke in heavier sheets, but within their huddle there was a strange calm, and Maya whispered like prayer. Maya Ortiz said, "My brother once tried to save one. He failed," and the word failed hung like smoke. Evan Hale said, "That's not tonight," and he drew the blade across the last of the wire. The metal gave way with a snap like bone, and the crane shuddered. The bird's eye caught lightning, a flash of amber against black, and Maya's chest seized with memory. Evan Hale said, "We freed it, but it won't fly," and sorrow pressed down like the tide. Maya Ortiz said, "Then it will learn to stand first," and she bound the leg firm though her hands trembled with old grief. The thunder rolled away, leaving a softer rain like whispers on the reeds, and for a moment the marsh listened. Maya Ortiz said, "I still hear him," and she meant her brother, not the bird. Evan Hale said, "He is here in this fight," and he pressed his palm firmer on the crane's chest, anchoring it. The bird exhaled in a sound not quite sigh, not quite hiss, but alive. Maya Ortiz said, "I swore never to feel this weight again." And yet she leaned closer, eyes wet not from the storm. Evan Hale said, "You carry it because you care," and the words carried their own fracture. The crane's feathers lifted and fell like tiny sails, fragile but refusing to collapse. For the first time, silence between them did not feel like loss but a fragile pact. The rain lightened to a drizzle, and headlights approached faint across the levee. Cole Maddox said, "You two will answer for this," though his silhouette stayed back. Evan Hale said, "Let him answer to the bird first," and he lifted the crane into his arms. Its wings sagged, but its head rose with stubborn grace. Maya Ortiz said, "It won't be easy," and the words tasted of both warning and hope. Evan Hale said, "Nothing worth saving ever is," and his eyes burned at the horizon. The crane blinked slowly, as if acknowledging the hands that carried it from mud to uncertain mercy. Maya Ortiz said, "Then we hold it until it holds itself," and the night finally gave a pause before the next storm. The storm eased, but the world was no calmer, as Evan Hale carried the crane toward the ranger station, every step dragging mud and weight. Maya Ortiz said, the legs bleeding again, and her voice tightened with dread. Evan Hale said, "We'll stitch it there," though he doubted his own strength. The bird sagged against him, head lolling, breath shallow. Cole Maddox followed behind, boots loud on wet earth, and he said, "Rules are clear. You move it without clearance, you're trespassers." Evan Hale said, "Then mark me guilty," and pushed harder through the reeds. The ranger lights flickered in the distance, but the road between felt endless, swallowed by fog. Maya Ortiz said, "Hold on, we're not losing it now," though her eyes betrayed fear. Thunder rumbled again, not from the storm but from the fight ahead. Inside the ranger station, fluorescent bulbs hummed, casting a sickly green light on dripping clothes and trembling hands. Evan Hale laid the crane on a metal table, feathers slick, chest fluttering shallow. Maya Ortiz said, "We need saline thread, clamps," her words fast, clipped, urgent. Dr. Lewis Grant appeared in the doorway, tie loose, expression like stone. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "This facility is not licensed for wild rehab," and the words echoed like a lock. Evan Hale said, "Then we'll improvise," his hands already pulling instruments from the emergency drawer. Cole Maddox said, "You're breaking law, not wire this time," voice sharp with threat. The crane gave a weak cry, a sound that silenced even the storm outside. Maya Ortiz said, "If the law won't protect life, then the law has failed." The hum of bulbs grew louder, like judgment. The sutures slipped in wet feathers, and Evan cursed under his breath as the wound bled again. Evan Hale said, "Hold it steady," and Maya pressed the crane's wing flat, her hands trembling but firm. The bird jerked once, beak clacking in fear. Maya Ortiz said, "You're hurting it." But Evan's jaw clenched like iron. He said, "Pain means life," and drove the needle again. Cole Maddox leaned close, arms crossed, and muttered, "One slip and it dies, and that's on you." Evan Hale said, "It dies if we wait," sweat mixing with rain on his face. The stitches finally caught, pulling wound edges close, but the crane sagged limp and the room froze. Maya Ortiz whispered, "Stay, just stay," and the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The crane stirred, breathing ragged but present, and for a moment, relief softened the air. Then the backup generator coughed, lights flickering, plunging the room into shadows. Maya Ortiz said, "We're losing power," panic rising sharp. Evan Hale said, "Get the lamp," and his voice cut through the dark. Cole Maddox said, "This is a sign to stop," but Evan ignored him, striking matches, flames trembling in wet air. Maya Ortiz found the lantern, its weak glow spilling gold over feathers. Evan Hale said, "We finish what we start," as his hands worked by firelight. The crane blinked, eyes catching flame, and the shadow of its wings stretched across the wall like a ghost. The rain outside thickened again, drumming roof like war, and Evan tied the final knot in silence. He exhaled slow, chest aching. Evan Hale said, "It's stable for now," but his eyes stayed on the shallow rise and fall. Maya Ortiz said, "Stable isn't enough," her voice almost breaking. Dr. Lewis Grant returned, clipboard in hand, saying, "Transport permit denied, risk too high," and his tone was final. Evan Hale said, "Then the permit burns with me," and slammed the needle case shut. The crane shifted, lifting its head slightly, a fragile defiance that filled the room with awe. Maya Ortiz said, "It wants to fight," and her tears cut lines through dirt on her face. Cole Maddox muttered, "Fight won't save it from rules," but his voice faltered against the sound of life refusing silence. The lantern light trembled across the ranger station walls, when Maya Ortiz noticed something tucked beneath the crane's wing. She peeled back damp feathers and revealed a faded leather tag. Maya Ortiz said, "This isn't wild, Evan. Someone kept it." Her words cut sharper than the storm. Evan Hale said, "No, it can't be," but the brand burned clear against his doubt. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "This proves it's contraband, likely stolen from breeding stock," and his voice carried bitter triumph. The crane stirred, a low rasp escaping its beak, as if the truth itself wounded deeper. Maya Ortiz said, "Someone chained it before the snare ever caught it," her eyes wide with grief and rage. Evan Hale clenched his fists, shaking his head. Evan Hale said, "It was never free, not for a single day," and silence pressed heavy around them. Maya's hands trembled as she traced the tag, letters half-worn but cruelly permanent. Maya Ortiz said someone owned it, like a pet, like property, her voice breaking. Evan Hale said, "It explains the wire snare too precise for accident." Cole Maddox stepped forward, boots echoing, and said, "Plenty profit in rare birds if you know buyers." His smirk withered under Maya's glare. Evan Hale said, "You knew," and his voice cracked with fury. Cole Maddox said, "I heard rumors," brushing off guilt like rain from a coat. The crane shifted weakly, letting out a broken croak. Maya Ortiz said it was stolen, broken, and now left to die for greed, each word like iron. The lantern hissed, filling silence with its fragile flame. Dr. Lewis Grant slammed his clipboard shut, sharp enough to echo in the storm-muted room. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "This makes it evidence, not a patient. It belongs in chain of custody." Evan Hale said, "It belongs in the sky," fury slicing each word. Maya Ortiz said, "It's been tortured enough. You can't cage it again." Cole Maddox muttered, "That bird's worth more than all of us combined," but his greed curdled in the golden light. Evan Hale leaned over the table, face inches from the cranes, and whispered, "I will not let you be currency." The crane blinked once, its gaze fierce despite weakness, and it felt like assent. Maya Ortiz placed her hand over Evan's, sealing the vow with quiet defiance. The storm outside cracked again, like the world breaking with them. Maya Ortiz said, "This isn't rescue anymore. It's a fight against chains we can't see." Evan Hale said, "Then we cut them all," and his voice carved the air. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "You'll lose your license, your freedom, everything," his warning half plea, half threat. Evan Hale said, "What's freedom worth if not this?" His stare pinned Grant to silence. Cole Maddox scoffed, but the sound was hollow. The crane stretched its neck weakly, eyes sharp, defiance alive even in pain. Maya Ortiz whispered, "It still chooses to rise," and her tears glistened in lantern glow. Evan Hale said, "Then so do we," steady and fierce. The room felt smaller, charged with storm and revelation. The truth weighed heavier than the storm, reshaping every choice. Maya Ortiz said, "It was never just about saving it. It's about undoing what was stolen." Evan Hale said, "Then we rewrite its fate," and the promise cut deep into silence. Dr. Lewis Grant looked down, his certainty cracking voice quieter. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "If word gets out, we'll face more than fines. We'll face hunters." Cole Maddox shifted uneasily, the weight of greed suddenly less steady. The crane rested but lifted its head, blinking at each of them in turn, judge and survivor both. Maya Ortiz said, "It deserves to see dawn," and her voice rang final. Evan Hale said, "Then dawn it will see." And for the first time the storm outside felt like an ally, washing clean the lies. The storm returned with violent force, rattling the ranger station windows as if the night itself demanded surrender. Evan Hale braced his arms on the table, eyes locked on the crane's labored breathing. Maya Ortiz said, "We can't keep it here. Hunters will come," and fear sharpened every syllable. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "Moving it now could kill it," his voice thin with doubt. Evan Hale said, "Leaving it here guarantees it," and his tone cut like a blade. The lantern guttered, shadows clawing the walls, while outside thunder split the air. Cole Maddox muttered, "This is madness," though his eyes betrayed cracks in greed's armor. Maya Ortiz said, "We move at dawn," but the crane shuddered, its chest rattling like torn paper. Evan Hale leaned close, whispering, "Not yet, not yet, hold with me," his knuckles white with resolve. Rain hammered harder, seeping under doors, flooding the floor in thin sheets. Maya Ortiz said, "The station will drown before the bird does," urgency breaking her calm. Evan Hale pulled off his jacket, wrapping it tight around the crane's body. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "If you move it now its heart could fail," his warning desperate. Evan Hale said, "Better to die free in the storm than rot under chains," his eyes aflame. Cole Maddox barked, "You're throwing away lives," but the sound lacked conviction. The crane lifted its head faintly, beak tapping air as though testing freedom. Maya Ortiz whispered, "It still wants the sky," and her tears mixed with storm water. Evan Hale said, "Then we fight for that sky," as thunder shattered glass in the window. The station door burst open under wind, slamming against the wall, and the storm rushed in with fury. Evan Hale cradled the crane, shielding it with his body. Maya Ortiz grabbed the medical kit, shouting, "Go, we don't have a choice." Dr. Lewis Grant blocked the doorway, voice breaking. "If you leave now, you destroy everything I've built." Evan Hale said, "Then let it burn," and shoved past, mud sucking at his boots instantly. Lightning carved white scars across the marsh as rain stung like shards of glass. Cole Maddox hesitated, torn between loyalty and greed, then followed reluctantly. The crane shifted in Evan's arms, feathers slick but eyes fierce as if sensing the stakes. Maya Ortiz said, "Run, Evan, before they stop us," her voice raw and unshaken. The marsh swallowed them instantly, mud dragging like chains and wind screaming. Evan Hale staggered, the crane's weight pressing heavy, but his grip never faltered. Maya Ortiz waited at his side, flashlight beam barely piercing the storm. Cole Maddox cursed under his breath, each step a battle against Maya. Dr. Lewis Grant shouted from the doorway, "You'll all be ruined," but the storm stole his word. Evan Hale said, "We already are if we stop," teeth clenched against Cole. The crane shifted, wings twitching weakly against the wrap, fighting even in weakness. Maya Ortiz cried, "Almost there, the truck!" though her voice cracked in wind. Lightning illuminated them as silhouettes of defiance against drowning dark. At the levee, headlights cut through the storm, Maya's SUV waiting like fragile salvation. Evan Hale stumbled the last steps, arms shaking but locked tight around the crane. Maya Ortiz said, "Get it in, hurry," her voice hoarse but commanding. Cole Maddox shoved open the rear hatch, eyes darting between greed and survival. Evan Hale laid the crane gently inside, breath ragged, heart hammering. The bird's head lifted, catching the headlights, eyes glowing like embers refusing to die. Dr. Lewis Grant's silhouette appeared behind them, drenched, shouting, "If you leave now, you'll never come back." Evan Hale said, "Then this is the road we take," slamming the hatch shut. The storm howled approval, drowning out every doubt. Dawn broke over the levee, pale gold light slicing through the storm's retreat. Evan Hale leaned against the SUV, wet hair plastered, chest rising in ragged breaths. Maya Ortiz knelt beside the crane, gently lifting it, murmuring, "You made it, you're safe." The bird blinked slowly, wings twitching as if testing gravity for the first time. Cole Maddox stood apart, silent, watching guilt and awe wrestle across his face. Dr. Lewis Grant arrived, drenched but calm, exhaling sharply. "It survived. Against all odds." Evan Hale said, "And it will fly again," eyes on the horizon, hope breaking through exhaustion. Maya Ortiz said softly, "We did right by it," brushing rainwater from feathers. The marsh lay still, reflecting the sun like glass, a fragile piece after chaos. Evan Hale opened the SUV's rear hatch, and the crane stepped lightly onto the ground, testing legs that trembled but obeyed. Maya Ortiz said, "You're free now," her voice quivering. Cole Maddox swallowed hard, muttering, "Never thought I'd see this." Dr. Lewis Grant knelt, touching the bird's feathers, whispering, "Alive and whole." Evan Hale smiled faintly, the first real smile in days. The marsh around them shimmered with droplets, reeds bending under gentle wind. Maya Ortiz said, "Let it go when it wants," and stepped back. The crane paused, looked at each human, then flapped slowly, a hesitant lift. Thunder still rumbled far away, but now, as distant applause. The crane rose finally, wings spanning wide, catching the morning light. Evan Hale and Maya Ortiz held their breath, watching the first real flight. Cole Maddox whispered, "It's magnificent," as the bird climbed higher. Dr. Lewis Grant nodded slowly, saying, "All the risk, worth it." The marsh echoed with distant calls of other birds, welcoming the survivor. Evan Hale said, "Some things aren't ours to own, only to protect." Maya Ortiz reached out instinctively, then smiled, letting go. The crane wheeled gracefully above, golden sunlight glinting off wet wings, a living testament to survival. Each human felt the weight of relief and humility settled deep in their chest. With the crane ascending, Evan Hale and Maya Ortiz walked slowly back to the SUV, mud squelching beneath boots. Cole Maddox muttered apologies that sounded hollow even to him. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "You taught me something today," eyes fixed on the sky. Evan Hale said, "Then carry it forward," voice quiet but steady. Maya Ortiz laughed softly, the sound warm in the wet morning air. Each step felt lighter, as if releasing the weight of fear and guilt. The sun climbed higher, gilding reeds, water, and distant trees. Silence, no longer threatening, wrapped around them like a gentle exhale. By midday the storm had passed entirely, leaving the marsh tranquil and glistening. Evan Hale drove slowly down the levee road, Maya Ortiz beside him, eyes on the horizon. Cole Maddox rode in silence, understanding at last the cost of greed. Dr. Lewis Grant followed in a separate vehicle, notebook forgotten, witnessing life reclaimed. Evan Hale said, "We survived, but it's bigger than us," voice calm. Maya Ortiz nodded, whispering, "We just had to be worthy." The crane, now far above, circled once before disappearing toward open sky. Every ripple in the marsh mirrored their renewed hope, a promise that nature, though fragile, endures. Weeks later, the marsh hummed with life, birds calling in rhythms that felt like celebration. Evan Hale and Maya Ortiz stood on a wooden observation deck, binoculars raised, scanning the waters. Cole Maddox lingered behind, hands in pockets, quiet reflection in his eyes. Dr. Lewis Grant, notebook abandoned, sketched rapid impressions of the returning wildlife, ink smudged by damp air. Maya Ortiz whispered, "It feels different, lighter." Evan Hale nodded, watching a heron lift into gold light. The wind carried scents of salt and reed, mingling with the warmth of sun on wet soil. Even Cole Maddox seemed to release old burdens, smiling faintly. In the distance, the crane circled, a dark silhouette against endless sky, free and unafraid. Evan Hale knelt beside a small pool, letting his fingers ripple the water. Maya Ortiz crouched nearby, pointing to minnows darting between reeds. Cole Maddox cleared his throat, offering a small joke, "Guess they survived better than me." Laughter broke the morning stillness. Dr. Lewis Grant said, "Life is persistent," eyes tracing insects skimming water. Evan Hale smiled, "We were just passengers for a while, now we guide gently." Maya Ortiz's hair caught the light as she brushed it behind her ear, eyes soft with memory of storms past. All four shared a quiet moment, understanding that resilience is often invisible, but unmistakable when it rises. By afternoon, the team walked along the main levee, boots crunching dry reeds. Evan Hale said, "It's astonishing what returns when we step back." Maya Ortiz glanced at him, nodding, "Nature teaches patience." Cole Maddox admitted softly, "I underestimated it." And them. Dr. Lewis Grant observed a flock of geese rising, exhaling. Every storm ends. Every scar heals. Wind lifted dust and pollen, golden in the sun. The crane appeared overhead once more, wings steady and wide. Maya Ortiz reached for Evan Hale's hand instinctively. He squeezed gently. Silence carried lessons deeper than words, echoing in hearts and reeds alike. Evening fell, painting the marsh in deep amber and violet streaks. Evan Hale and Maya Ortiz sat on the deck, binoculars down, sipping warm tea. Cole Maddox leaned against the railing, quiet but thoughtful. Dr. Lewis Grant packed sketches into a satchel, murmuring, "These will remind everyone of what perseveres." The crane appeared far above, gliding effortlessly, wings catching the fading light. Evan Hale said, "Freedom isn't just theirs, it's ours too when we let go." Maya Ortiz rested her head lightly on his shoulder. Shadows lengthened, and with them came a feeling of completion, a cycle fulfilled, trust restored. Night settled, stars mirrored in marsh waters, silver and infinite. Evan Hale closed his notebook, voice quiet, "We've done what we could, and that's enough." Maya Ortiz smiled. "It always is." Cole Maddox, surprisingly serene, muttered, "I'll remember this differently now." Dr. Lewis Grant gazed at constellations, adding final notes, Life teaches humility in every stroke. The crane's distant call echoed, answering unseen companions. The team lingered a moment longer, feeling the marsh's pulse, a living promise that the world endures, that courage, patience, and care shape more than survival. They create hope.